Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the weekend wrap-up show here. I'm David Thomas, and across from me is Mr. Josh Blevins. We're here to talk about the news that matters. And Josh, you've got quite a bit of things on the list
We
today.
had a full week. We warned people last week this was going to be a busy week, and it sure was.
So
A
you've
lot of
been
meetings.
a lot of meetings, a lot of activity in government,
Yep.
and we'll be getting back to that as soon as we hear from our sponsor, Dennis Young Insurance. We'll be right back.
Yep.
Get the results you want with the personalized service you deserve at Dennis Young Insurance Agency.
As a local independent agency, we offer coverage from several different companies, including Erie. So whether it's auto, home, life, personal, or business, we can find the right coverage to meet your unique insurance needs. And with a rate lock advantage, your rates won't go up as long as you do not change drivers, autos, or addresses. Contact us at Dennis Young Insurance Agency, insuring Shelbyville and surrounding areas since 19...
Welcome back to the weekend wrap up, February 15, 2025. I'm David Thomas, Josh Blevins. We're back in here to talk about the news that matters. Josh, I know you've got a full slate here, so hit the ground running.
We got a full slate. I started Monday morning at the city pre-planning meeting, and not as busy of an agenda as sometime, but it was a full meeting. Went an hour like it usually does. Actually went a little over an hour.
Can I ask you one question just real quick?
Yeah.
A pre-planning meeting, does that mean you plan to plan?
You plan to plan. Yeah, exactly. So this is the meeting. Yeah, we've talked about it several times, I think. This is where all the heads of the city departments that are involved in anything that would involve construction or growth get together and look at the items that are going to be on the following month's planning commission agenda. They give comments back. In addition to the city staff that's there, all the developers are there, and they can ask questions of the city can ask questions of them. So they kind of get on the same page so that everybody's, moving in the same direction before it gets to planning.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so they get feedback from everybody.
That's for those people that might not know what that is.
Yeah, what that is. It's not one it's not an advertised meeting. It doesn't have to be. It's a staff meeting. There's no voting that goes on. There's no Yeah, it's just literally a back and forth between the developer and the city staff, which includes fire, police, public works, water, power. Everybody's there. Sometimes city engineers there, I think. Definitely the planning department's there, city attorney's there. So they're just going back and forth on these projects. And quite a few. We'll mention a couple. There's a parcel on the bypass that they're going to look to upzone to R4. It's currently R2 or R3. Honestly, don't remember the current zoning. But there's the chance, and this didn't get mentioned at pre-planning, but I've just heard this as part of the discussion of this parcel. There's a chance they could be looking at putting an apartment complex there. So we'll definitely be keeping an eye on that. Honestly, and we'll get into this later on in the rundown, we don't have in the city of Shelbyville, if you look, because I actually had a friend that has a son that's looking right now. If you want to just rent an apartment in an apartment complex and you're just a regular guy, middle income, and aren't looking for an income-based apartment, we don't have that in Shelbyville. I believe there's one, as far as I know. There may be more than one. There's one I'm aware of. Other than that, everything is either income-based or something we'll get to later in the rundown, where we're doing this infill development where we're tearing down 2 or 3 houses and putting up a small number of apartment units, but it's not a complex. They don't have, if you live in Nashville, if you live in Murfreesboro, if you live in Wilson County, any of the bigger counties, if you're looking to rent, a lot of times you'll go into a complex which has amenities and nice stuff. It's got a clubhouse, it's got a pool, it's got a workout room, it's got a dog park, it's got a playground. And we don't have that for our residents here, really, other than this one that I'm aware of over off Green Lane. I don't know of any other ones.
Here's I think the issue that we're going to face, and we are facing right now, is the cost of rent in a place like that.
Yeah.
And you're bringing it to a demographic that struggles. I mean, you're looking at $1,500 to $2,200 range for a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom apartment. It's going to be tough.
I will say on the flip side, these ones that we're getting right now, which are the ones with no amenities, no green space, no dog park, no nothing, they're running. And I actually saw a new listing went up this week, and I'll mention one by name because it's on Zillow. There's one, if you look at that one just next to the bypass, those units there that kind of look all uniform brick, $1,400 for unfurnished. 2 bedrooms, you're talking like 700 square feet, no space, $2,300 a month furnished. So
Unreal.
no amenities, no pool, no clubhouse, no nothing. So
Yeah, well, you
why
can't.
shouldn't we offer our residents at least a place that has, a couple
Okay,
amenities? and
the
stuff?
question
So, yeah.
becomes, how does this build out
Right,
and those amenities? Is
Sure.
it going to be a cookie cutter approach to what we've already got,
right.
or is this a step up?
Yeah.
But these developers that do these and the management companies, they're going to want to make money.
Oh,
And-
sure,
and
yeah,
right
and
now,
these- yeah.
that's what the name of the game is for them.
Right.
And I just don't know of our demographics. I mean, it's a struggle for a young family to start out, or even a single person. It's impossible.
Well, and again, so we'll go to my specific illustration there. The son of a friend of mine that's actually has to stay in town. He just got a good job in town, looking for rental. He's going to pay $1,400 a month in this one apartment complex that's in town that's not income based. So if this other company could come in and build some nicer ones and stay within, $100 or $200 of that, I mean, he might be willing,
Yeah.
and he's a single guy looking to get married soon, but he might be willing to pay another $100, $200 a month to get a nicer place. I tell you, the ones that we lived at before we moved here, we were the first one in our particular unit. It was a new construction. It had granite countertops. It had wood floors. It had, stainless appliances. It was like you were in a really nice house, but you were in a complex. And again, it had a dog park.
Yeah.
It had a playground.
So it's upscale.
It had a 365-day a year pool. The pool was open year round. Clubhouse. It was nice. So
I'm not trying to drag you down or slow
No.
down, because I know we got a lot to cover.
we got a lot to go.
But I
yeah.
understand why they're not furnished in
Sure.
some cases, because that extra rent, and by the time you pay it, you don't need a refrigerator because you can't put anything in it.
You can't afford it. So,
you don't
yeah.
need a stove because
Yeah.
there's nothing to cook.
Right. Yeah. And I would say with this
Yeah.
particular one that they're looking at, which we're getting bogged down really early,
Yeah.
but we do have the MTSU campus coming to town pretty soon. Some of those students might look to live here if we had that type of accommodations, whereas
Yeah.
currently we don't offer that. So they're going to live in Murfreesboro
So you're
instead.
saying build it
So
and they will come?
I-
Maybe.
hopefully. I don't
Okay.
know.
All right.
I'm just saying it may or may not be good.
Okay.
We haven't even seen
Yeah.
anything
Do
other
you know
than
the location
rezoning.
of this?
I do, yeah. It's right one of the first 2 or 3 parcels when you get on the bypass off 231. It's there. It connects between McDale and the bypass. The parcel
Gotcha.
does.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right.
So we'll see. It'll be one we'll definitely have an eye on. They're doing a very small addition to our actual Walmart building. They're a little over 3,000 square feet. From the drawings that I saw, it looks like this is going to be a new area, as has happened a lot in recent years. Nobody likes to go in the store anymore.
Yeah.
So I think they're getting so much pickup activity where you go online, you get in the queue and they come pick it up. I think they're expanding the way that they do that to make that more efficient is what it looked like.
Do you know which side of the building it's going to be on? Or
It was towards the parking lot and I believe
The garden
towards
section?
the south. No, I think it was the other
Oh,
side. It
okay.
looked like on
Yeah.
from what I
on
saw.
the grocery store end?
Yeah, I think so. So, the biggest thing on the agenda was Walmart DC. They are adding 706,156 square feet, so a little over 700,000 square feet. Their finished facility there, when this is all said and done, is going to pass 1 million square feet, 1,077,000 square feet, which is huge.
That's by far going to be the largest building in Bedford County.
Well, and not only that, this new expansion, which I asked this question like 3 times because it seemed crazy to me, but I was told that the roof height of this building is going to come in at just under 90 feet tall. That's like 7 or 8 stories tall. That's a huge
Yes.
building, and it's wide open inside. I would assume some kind of a truss. I didn't see the drawings. I'll get those at planning in another month, but I would assume some kind of a steel truss or some kind of building, and just wide open warehouse
Wow.
space, just massive building that they're adding. So, which we talked about a little bit last week because we knew it was coming. Probably going to be a lot of automation in there, but
Yeah.
you got to assume they got to add some employees.
They gotta
for
have
this much
people for
space.
that.
So this is going to be really
That's
good.
a massive.
Oh, it's
increase.
a huge building.
They're
Yeah.
they're tripling their space.
It was supposed to be about a double, so maybe one of those numbers. No, those were the numbers they had on there, and I'll get an actual drawing and stuff
That's
at planning
massive.
in a month. But it's a big space, so
DC, the DC is a big employer here in Bedford County.
They're already a
and
big
if they're
employer.
expanding this much,
they're going to get a lot
so
bigger.
there's going to be, and it's from what I understand, the people that work there love their jobs.
Yep.
So
Yeah, good paying jobs.
Yeah.
We appreciate them being here. Now, one thing I will point out, and I think this will be something we'll probably look at and plan. Well, 2 things. It is so big that the state is going to review this one as far as the fire marshal and fire protection. This is a huge facility. And it's so big that the state's going to come in and do a review of it, kind of like happened at Duxon. And this isn't,
Okay.
we didn't even have to ask them on this one. It's so big that they do that.
You're going to have water
size.
issues
So
here.
that's
a massive sprinkler system. Josh.
That'll be a concern, I'm sure,
Yeah.
that'll come on down the road. And then the other thing that happens a lot with DC, people may or may not know, is we have truck queuing issues there on the main
Right.
road out to 231. We don't have there's not a truck stop in Shelbyville or Bedford
Right.
County. There's nowhere for them to go. So if they get there ahead of when they're supposed to be allowed into the facility, they don't, they've got
Right.
a window that
Yeah.
they can come in there. They can't just accept unlimited trucks either. So we get trucks that try to park on that airport business park drive.
Oh, that's bad.
Every day we have police out there having to move truck drivers
Yeah.
along and stuff. So hopefully, and I think I've heard as part of this expansion, they're going to get some more space inside the footprint of Walmart
Right.
DC, where they can get more trucks in there
That'd be good.
to hopefully help with their truck queuing, because that is a problem that's ongoing, and it's using actually police resources.
Could be
every
an
day long,
opportunity
so.
for somebody to put a large truck stop out there.
I
you
would
know?
wonder what our county zoning is if it would allow it on 231. But yeah, man, if you had a big truck stop on 231 between the chicken trucks
Yeah,
and the
man,
Walmart
there's-
DC trucks, you
yeah.
could at least get a decent amount of business. You would think. So, and then in just the not going to go into each of them, but just in general, and there were a lot of other smaller items on the agenda. But we had another 121 residential units across several different developments that either had plats or construction plans go through. That's just another sign of we're continuing, as we always say, we keep adding people into town. So
More rooftops, more
this is
rooftops.
just a sign. 1 month, 121 new units that are in the process. They didn't get approved at this meeting,
Right,
but
of
they're
course
being
not,
discussed. So, moving on to Monday afternoon, same day, a couple hours later, we had a big growth strategic meeting at the H.V. Griffin Park at the rec center there. This was all the members of City Council. This was all the members of the City Planning Commission, and this was the board and chairman of Shelbyville Power and Water. We had this exact same meeting twice last year, I think February and April. And I'll just a general, from me being at both of them now, I felt like we didn't move the needle a whole lot at this one. I felt like it was a lot of talk and we didn't get a whole lot of action points out of it. I will say a couple things that were discussed. We got some updated 3-year growth numbers. There was a chart that was at last year's meeting that he'd adjusted it and then re-showed it again with new numbers. But I went a little deeper. They sent it to us after the fact. I felt like and we put these numbers out at the time, it overinflated what's actually going on. If you actually look at the final plat number for each year, which that's when the construction's actually happening, when you get to the final plat stage, in the last 3 years, we've had 967 final plats, which that's an average of a little over 300 residential units a year, which that's a number we found last week when we looked at the power report. We had about 317 new residents. So that's about what's going on in the city. If you looked at the previous chart, there was a couple years on there that showed like 900 units. But what that was is they were combining preliminary plat and final plat. So you were double counting a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah.
So these are more accurate numbers. So in the last 3 years, 967, that's about how many new residential units have come inside the city limits of Shelbyville. We already have a growth committee, which is just a few members. It's like 3 people on it only. They've had 2 meetings. I went to all of them. I'm not on that committee, but I did attend just to get the information. They've been working on updates to our PUDs and high density residential developments. Those are going to be presented to the Planning Commission this month, which is in about 2 weeks. So we're hopefully going to increase our green space requirements. We're going to increase our side setback requirements, which are too small. And then there's a lot of language cleanup in there that they're also going to work on.
Can I make a motion?
Parking.
Can I make a motion?
Make a motion.
From the floor.
From the floor.
Could we change the name of this to Overpopulation Management Commission?
Instead of growth?
Because that's what we're doing here, Josh. We're
Right.
we're looking for the future to manage overpopulation. That's
Right.
what all of our counties are doing around here, as they're having to deal with the same thing.
Oh, sure. Too many people and not enough resources
Yes,
and
it's
infrastructure.
overpopulation,
Yeah.
basically.
So
And I drove to Murfreesboro 2 or 3 times this week. It's
it's a mess.
And let me tell you, it doesn't
Yeah.
start now. It used to just start at the county line,
Right.
Rutherford County. And no, it
Yeah.
starts at the city limits of Shelbyville as far as traffic.
Right.
And you can just see we're in trouble. if we don't figure out some stuff quick.
Yeah, it's coming whether we're ready or
Yeah.
not. So we need to be ready. There was a request made at this meeting by Councilman Feldhaus for an additional growth committee. It was mentioned again by our city manager. They're looking into it, but I don't know how this committee will be different. We've already got one growth committee, so how many committees do we need? I don't know that yet. I think he was thinking about also adding some members of Shelbyville Power onto that committee, which are not on the current one. The current one has the planning director and a member of city council and a member of the planning commission. So honestly, I mean, if it were me, I'd take the current one, just add a couple people to it rather than adding. I mean, how many committees do we really need? So,
Yeah.
So we'll see where
This
that goes.
this also should be called, in parentheses, the Common Sense Committee.
The Common Sense Committee would be nice, yeah. And then the final item that actually ate up a lot of time at the end of this meeting, there was a lot of discussion on the lack of fire protection available in the areas on the north side of town where we're doing all the expansion on 231, like the MTSU,
Right.
TCAT, Duxon, I mean, everything going on up there. BCUD is not offering adequate water for fire protection, so they're having to put in towers, water towers at each of these locations as they go along.
That's not cheap.
And yeah, that adds obviously to the cost of it. And the city wishes that BCUD would just give up that service area. BCUD's not willing to give up that service area. I mean, that's their service area. You know, there's no reason they have to give up that
So
service
the city
area.
wants to service it with Shelbyville Power?
With Shelbyville Power, because
Yeah.
they have higher water capacity. It could provide
Right.
higher. And so there's a lot of friction there, a lot of back and forth.
Okay, what's the
And-
common sense thing here? Let's think about it. It's in the city limits
Yeah.
based on our map. We're
Right.
in this.
But you've got state utility laws
okay.
that supersede anything local, and they've got utility, whatever, that's their utility area, has been for as far back as in time as
Yeah.
they've had a utility
Yeah.
district. So they're not, they have no obligation to
And
give it up.
sometimes this
So-
expansion and growth mode makes you look stupid. Sometimes it does, because
Well-
it's been done this way for 50 years. We'll
Right.
continue to do it this way.
yeah.
Sometimes you got to use common sense. No, it makes sense to change in a different
Right.
direction now. Maybe the state and our county and our city
Need to all get
these
together
can
and-
get together in a room and use that common sense. And say, this might be
Well,
better.
We would hope
yeah.
so, but and we may get there. That's it for that meeting, really. Tuesday evening was our big county commission meeting. This is one, if I'd had more time this weekend, I would have put together a couple clips, but honestly, we're going to go so long anyways that would just made it longer. But this meeting went off the rails like within the first 15 minutes, maybe less. Right off the top, they forgot to approve the previous meeting's minutes, so I guess they'll clean that up at some point in the future. And then they did the public comment period, and instead of the way public comment period normally works, the public makes a couple comments, then you move
Go
on
back
to
to
the
your
agenda.
agenda.
You go
Yeah,
back to your agenda. For whatever reason, they decided to start interacting with the people that were giving the public comments. So first, the meeting chair gave some reaction.
That violates
Yeah.
the rules that were set up for the public comment period that our county set up, right?
I don't know if those are rules or
They
just
get
the
3
regular
minutes.
practices, but yeah, it's the 3 minutes.
and you do
They
it,
did
and
that.
it's
They did the
before
3 minutes
before the meeting. Then you go to the agenda.
Yeah, normally you would just go to the
Yeah.
agenda and you don't. But for whatever reason, we started with the chairman, started giving some feedback, and then it turned into, at that point, the county commissioners felt like they needed to chime in because there was some
Of
back
course,
and forth going.
yeah.
So we started getting hands up. We had questions, and
Yeah.
the next thing you know, we were into a full-fledged debate
before a
on-
motion or anything.
before we even we weren't even there on the agenda, let alone a motion. So eventually somebody, called a point of
Drew
order and got
Hooker.
it back.
Drew Hooker,
Drew got it back in line, and we did it the way it was supposed to be. But so when we did really get to it on the agenda, we had, which we've spoken about, I think, a couple times now, we had a resolution on the agenda to send a private act up for a county wastewater authority. Ton of debate. This meeting went, I think, close to an hour and a half, hour and 20 minutes, which we'd had some as short as 15 minutes recently. So a
Yes.
lot more debate than we've been having
Right.
with the county commission. And the general consensus that I got being there and listening to the debate was there was a good idea that seemed to be behind the county wastewater authority, which was to help control growth and put some kind of regulation on top of step systems.
Right.
They're worried about step systems
failure of steps
coming into the
evidence,
county
yeah.
failing.
Yeah.
But what happened was the actual wording in the resolution and the private act seemed way broader than that.
Past that,
It
funding.
went way past. It was funding.
Yeah.
It was management. It was the only word they didn't have was construction. We caught that
Right.
last week. But other than that, you were acquiring them, you were funding them, you were running them. I mean, you were doing.
Sound
a lot
like you're
more
going
than,
into the business.
Sound like you were going into
Yeah.
the wastewater business, and it didn't seem like that was the that was not the stated goal, at least. And then nobody on the commission, or a lot of the commission, didn't seem to have the appetite to want to get into the wastewater business.
Well, here's what I picked up on it. It sounded like that this document was put together when you go for a private act. It's that document is attached. Drew Hooker pointed this out. Is attached to that private act.
Sure, the private act is the document,
and the statement was made. Well, we can make it whatever we want to. Well, let's just say we want to get into into the regulation side of this. Make a brief statement with it, not go into so much detail. Get your private act and then set it up.
Right.
Instead of having that, you're basically, when you vote on that private act to move it to the state, you're saying you agree with all this.
You're
stuff,
voting on the language. Yeah, that language.
So that language is what the issue was.
That's the debate. So they have the final result was they deferred it to come back to the county commission next month. In the meantime, the Courthouse and Property Committee, which was, for me, an unusual choice, was tasked with figure out a way to get us more information before we vote on this next month. That committee meets a week from the previous meeting. I mean, it meets in, 3 or 4 days from now,
right.
Tuesday night.
Can't get it
so
done.
They had a week to pull this together. We'll see. It's currently on the county website. It says they're going to have a study session on this hosted by the Courthouse and Property Committee on Tuesday night. So I'll obviously be there, and we'll see how much. Their goal was to try to get more outside expert help in, somebody like TDEC, somebody that's run step systems, somebody that, I mean, the best thing would be, could we get somebody from an actual wastewater authority from another county and say, hey, this is how we did it. You know, this is what worked. This is what didn't. So we'll see if they're able to pull that off in, a week's time. And other than that, the other big thing, and I didn't put it on here, that did get approved was the new speed limits in the county. We went with the 45 mile an hour on the 26 collector roads, 30 mile an hour on basically all other roads except for dead ends. Dead ends are 25. And the goal is, and it was even questioned by some of the county commissioners, they are going to put speed limit signs on every road they can get to in the county. We have a sign department, so they're going to start obviously with the big roads and work their way down to the smaller roads.
Okay,
so.
There's, of course, Steve Jordan is in with us today. John Hall talks about the overpopulation. And then Jeremy Leverett is wishing everybody well. And then in John Hall's statement, he refers to Don Hankins' article in the Times-Gazette.
She had a really good. Yeah, she had a really good opinion article this week.
And then Steve is talking about a treatment plant. Now, I think he's talking about the wastewater management here.
Or is he getting into BCUD, which we'll get to in a minute if he's talking BCUD.
Maybe so.
Yeah, we'll get to BCUD in a minute. They're coming up, so we haven't forgotten about them. But let's go to Wednesday evening. Wasn't a big meeting. Just wanted to point out, I went again, the beer board meeting, city beer board meeting. They, the reason I went is because they're talking about changing, possibly doing some tweaks to the city rules on beer and licensing and whatnot. But an interesting side note that I picked up on it, one of the things that was mentioned by one of the board members, Joey, can I pronounce his last name? Lamatina, the Italian restaurant that used to be over on Bethany. Loved that restaurant. He's no longer in that restaurant, but he's still a member of our beer board. And he brought up the fact that should we have some kind of city regulations on the fact that you can now go on DoorDash and have beer delivered to your house. Like, what's involved in that? Who's making sure that everybody's getting underage? Everybody, I mean, from the driver themselves, is the driver, are they checking the ID of the driver? And then is the driver checking the ID of the person on the other end? Hopefully there's some kind of state regulation on that, but it is going on. I sat at the meeting, pulled up my DoorDash app and looked, and sure enough, I can go on to DoorDash, select Speedway, and get a 6-pack delivered to the house, anytime of the day.
Does it ask you for age or identification?
Well, it did, and I didn't go through the whole process.
Maybe it comes through your account setup, maybe.
I would assume, that they try to somehow verify that. I don't know how they could. I mean, I would think you could fake that pretty easy. If you were a kid,
this is easy.
I mean, if I'm a kid, I'm thinking I'm using Dad's ID, putting this in
This is pretty easy right here to circle around.
So you hope the driver is, but where the city's concern would be is, say there were some restaurants doing this too. We issue a license to that restaurant to sell beer, and part of that requirement of them is on premise. So they are required to check the ID. They don't have the way to check the ID of some guy across town that just got beer delivered to his house. So what's so there were some questions there.
Legitimate situation.
Yeah. So it's, one of those things that, and that was never a thing, I don't think, before COVID. I don't think you could get beer delivered to your house. It's one of those things that COVID
brought
changed.
us a lot of junk.
Brought us a lot of weird things. So that was one that was brought up. So let's keep moving along. We still got a lot to go. Thursday morning, first time I'd ever attended the Bedford Railroad Authority meeting. So we have in Bedford County what is called the Walking Horse Railroad. Didn't know the name of it until this week. And in 2024, they either delivered to a business or took from a business 928 cars of materials. They have 4 major customers: Gold River Feed, a company called Revolution, don't know them; Albia, if I'm pronouncing that right, and Ferris Processing, which they're the metal recyclers over by the high school.
So that's going along the railroad track.
That's going along the railroad track.
On Railroad, we
next to Railroad Avenue.
Railroad Avenue.
So that's the deal. That is all of those companies. It's cheaper to move that volume of weight and product by railroad still than it is by big trucks.
And I think for everybody out there, but maybe it's not been around, we used to have tracks that go all the way down here,
all the way to Tyson,
out to the old rubber mill area. Okay, out to Uniroyal. So now that's all decommissioned, and from about the car wash on Madison Street up here, past McDonald's on the left, the railroad is stopped. The tracks are unfunctional at that point, but they run, and there's been cars stored up there in recent years up to about there.
Yep.
But after that, the tracks have been pulled up.
They have, and that's a whole other thing, which we didn't get into at this meeting, but it's coming down the pike. They're wanting to do this thing called the Rails to Trails project, where you completely decommission that, turn that into a walking trail so that people can walk, and like a green space kind of thing, which is what the long-term goal hopefully is. There's a lot of issues with that still. In particular, even if a bunch of money is invested in that to turn that into a trail, by law, if for some reason out of the blue, way down the line, 20 years, 30 years down the line, somebody decided, hey, we need railroad service back to Tyson, the railroad authority still has the ability to go back and re-put those tracks in and rerun a train.
And that's a possibility.
So, you don't ever know. So how much money do you want to put into, turn it into green space and stuff with a very small, I mean, obviously it's a tiny percentage possibility, but it could happen. And by law, it's allowed to happen.
Do you want to remain flexible enough to where if that did occur, you could get it done?
Right.
And is it more friendly for industry if you leave that option open? Rather than close it down and put the trails on it, you have to take it all apart.
Well, I think even at this point, it's so run down. You'd have to rerun tracks either way. Definitely. It's just how much money do you want to spend to turn into, a park system where there's the possibility of way down the road, which is, again, very unlikely, but it could happen. The other big thing that the Railroad Authority is working on that we talked about at the meeting, they have been rehabilitating the tracks. In the upcoming year, they have 3 crossings. They're going to redo Highway 64, Railroad Avenue, and there's a private road that crosses it. And in the past year they did, and we'd seen that even, and they've been doing some stuff even I've seen in War Trace and Bell Buckle and stuff, where they've been trying to upgrade the tracks, get them up to standards, and that's ongoing. So.
And speaking about that, I don't know if it's ever been brought up, but the delay time at War Trace is sometimes enormous.
Oh yeah, I hear that. Yeah, I see that on Facebook and stuff.
And for some reason, right through there, they usually stop and
they'll stop and
switch tracks or something, and it's back and forth, and you're there for 45 minutes sometimes. So
I will say the War Trace mayor was at this meeting, so he has a say in what the Railroad Authority does. Now, where the Railroad Authority has any say over CSX, who is I think the one that would normally be blocking the track, they may not have a lot of say in that.
Yeah.
So. Thursday afternoon, same day, this is where we're going to get back into BCUD. So we had seen a lot of people posting on Thursday that they had no water out in the county.
Yeah.
So I saw one person in particular had posted a bunch of comments about high turnover at the water treatment plant. So I get on the computer and went to TDEC and looked for some information. And then I actually got on the phone and talked to 2 former employees of BCUD, and then I talked to their current general manager. So what happened as far as the actual, then this is straight from the general manager. What happened with this outage was they have a single intake, which is the same as Shelbyville Power has, in the Duck River. And because of all the rain we had gotten at the beginning of the week there, it moved a bunch of debris and stuff was rushing down the river, and it clogged the intake. So, I mean, you think about it, you got straw in a drink and it gets clogged at the end. You can't get no drink through it.
That's right.
In this case, they had they have a big long straw for no better way to put it, into the river, and it was clogged up at the end. So they couldn't get water out of the river. So some of the initial posts were, "Oh, the county has run out of water." Well, the river's still running. The river's actually running higher than normal. Yeah. But in some respects, they're right, because for a while you could cover over the fact that the intake wasn't working because they do have water towers. Right. So they had some water. But once the towers ran out of water, then they really were in a pickle.
You start losing pressure, then you start losing water.
Yeah, and then so they have the ability to buy water from Shelbyville Power, which has a different intake at a different location, which wasn't clogged, but not a sufficient amount of water to completely backfill their entire system and keep the pressure up and whatnot. So that's what actually happened. It got clogged. He told me at the time he wasn't sure. We talked about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They were hoping to get it fixed that day by the end of the day. I didn't see any complaints online Friday, and I haven't seen anything this morning. So my guess is that it's working a whole lot better than it was. As far as the backstory that was posted by several people, which again, I spoke to some people other than the general manager, past employees, it is true that the BCUD water treatment plant operation was turned over in October of 2024 to a company called Inframark LLC. Just immediately prior to that turnover and through the transition process, the majority of the employees at the BCUD water treatment plant submitted their resignations. So you had people there, and I don't know all the individuals involved. I've heard of 2 in particular that I know enough that I would speak to that had worked there more than 20 years at this facility and are no longer there.
So the guys that know the routine and the issues there were gone.
They're gone. So whether or not you would logically think that maybe that was part of why they weren't able to fix the intake problem as quickly as maybe they normally might be able to. But on the other hand, they did get it fixed. So the new people, they didn't just hire some people in off the street. I mean, the guys that are in there now are, they have the correct state licenses. Right. They have experienced water treatment. They just haven't operated this particular plant before. So this was probably the first time they've run into this issue at this plant. Right. So
I hope they have the combination of what fixes it now.
Hopefully they know and they won't have this issue down the road. And obviously the longer they're there, they'll gain experience. But I mean, for the people that lost water for a day or a day and a half, they probably wish the guys that have been there 20 years had still been there and they had never lost the water. So
they could have got ahead of it.
Yeah. And I don't know all the reasoning behind BCUD. BCUD, a couple other points on BCUD. Saw a lot of posts online questioning or even blaming either county government or city government for what was going on.
Nothing to do with it.
It's called Bedford County Utility District. Just because it has the word Bedford County in it, you would think it's somehow connected to the county. It has zero connection to Bedford County government, to the city government. It's an independent utility company that was formed by state law, operated only under the control of TDEC, is the only one that has any say into what goes on at BCUD. The state has say into it. So, the county government at any level has zero input. They have a board, and their board is elected by the people that pay the bills at BCUD.
Exactly. These are private businesses that work in conjunction with local government. And people got to understand that our government is not supplying water. No. Our government is not supplying electricity. So don't get mad at the mayor. Right. Don't get mad at your commissioners and your councilmen. Don't get mad at the dog catcher. Don't get mad at the police department. Don't call the fire department. It's not their fault.
Yeah. Well, now I will say on the city side of things, just a little It's different in the city.
Right,
Shelbyville
right.
Power, they have a board now. Their board is appointed by the
mayor.
city council.
And yeah,
So at that point, you could say the city has a little bit more influence. And there is a member of city council and the city manager sit on the Shelbyville Power board. So there's a little more say there, but
you only
in
get
addition,
one vote per seat.
you get one vote, and that board is supposed to act independently.
Right.
The council is not supposed to be in there
No.
micromanaging them and doesn't have the power to. I can't
Right.
call up to them and say, hey, go fix this or fix this.
And the
shouldn't-
reason you do is
Yeah.
because you guys are managing overpopulation, and you got to watch your water issues,
well,
and there are a lot of other issues that come
yeah, and you don't want politics to
Right.
come into who's getting water and who's not
Exactly.
getting water, and you don't want politics coming into whose electric gets fixed first and whose electric doesn't
Yep.
get fixed first. So, yeah, so the BCUD board is way separate from government. The Shelbyville Power Board is an independent board, but has a little bit of government oversight.
Right.
That's how those work. So, Thursday evening, we had our city council meeting. I was hoping for a little more fireworks excitement in this one. This one was a little just kind of straightforward in business. So
Yeah,
we thought
yeah.
there might be a little more discussion. There was not a whole lot. We had 6 rezonings that were approved. There was one that was controversial. We've talked about it several times on the show. I think this is the one on Barksdale Lane, Whitthorne. It got approved. It actually split the council right down the middle, 3-3. The mayor was the deciding vote. He went with a yes. So that development will move forward. That is where they have taken a little under 6 acres, which was previously 2 or 3 parcels, combined them into a single parcel, and they're now going to build 44 apartments there on Barksdale.
on Malfunction Junction down here.
Down there. Now, they are supposed to fix that little weird
That's
power
gotta help.
pole in the middle of the intersection.
Yeah, yeah.
But other than that, there's likely no other improvements they'll be required to do out there. We'll see. They'll have to do a traffic study and stuff. Maybe there will be, but it looks like that they won't have to do any other road improvements
Yeah,
as part of the
well.
development of it. The reason I was against it, which I stated a number of different times, a number of meetings, was the fact that we have a few guidelines that we go on high density. That was R3A, which is still high density. It's not R4 density, but I know it's 44
Right.
apartments in under 6 acres. Normally, we would want those to be on a major collector road, and this is not on one. It's close to one.
Yeah.
It's about 5 residence doors away from one,
Yep.
but it's not on one. And then that road already has issues as far as it needs to be paved. It's
It needs
got
to
a
be widened.
weird, and
Oh,
it's got
yeah,
all
it's
kinds of
all
weird
that.
issues. And then in general, we had that growth meeting we had on Monday. One of the other councilmen mentioned that in his side of town, they're taking these big lots. We've got these big front yards and houses, and they're able, just under current zoning rules, to take a house that's been there for years on a big lot and squeeze like 2 or 3 other houses in the front yard, which is obviously not a great look in general. But in this case, we're taking what used to be where one family, or I don't even know what was here before, I think just a single family home, and we're going to put 44 families on the same piece of
Yeah.
property. And I think long term, that is not good for the city. That's a stress on infrastructure. It's
Oh,
a
of
stress
course
on
it is.
all kinds of
Yeah.
infrastructure, from schools to roads to, to power to water to everything. And going back to the first thing we talked about at pre-planning, these apartments that are going in these places have no amenities. Whereas me personally, just one person sitting on the council, I'd rather have a couple more of these apartment complexes. We can get some amenities, get some nicer
Right.
features, than to continue to infill the city with these small apartments that have nothing. And they're still getting what, for me, and I realize prices have gone up, are still big dollars for these.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
these are still going for
Overpriced.
$1,350,
They're
$1,375,
overpriced.
$1,400 a month. You're not even getting 800 square feet. And most of these run in the 700, 750 square feet, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and 2 parking spaces is about what they give you, because that's what our current
I'm
code
going
is.
to ask you this, and
Yeah.
you'll know the answer to this.
Yeah.
Whenever a developer comes in and starts to go down this path of developing a townhome complex or apartment complex where there are multifamily dwellings,
Right.
does the commission, does the planning commission get upfront information whether this is Section 8 housing or is that private?
No, that is not. I would assume, and I don't know all the laws on that, I would assume they would consider that to be discriminatory to look at whether it's government assisted, not government assisted. They really don't even have to say. They have said on the front end, we knew what this was going to be, that these were going to be rental units, but they could have told us that it was going to be townhomes for sale. They don't have to, at this stage where we're in the zoning,
Right.
they don't, and they didn't even have to tell us it was going to be 44 units. They were just trying to show it, to give a,
I
you know,
think
a good
what you
faith
call
of what's
here's the
happening,
thing.
so.
We want to yell discrimination all the time.
Yeah,
But Section 8 housing is government subsidized housing.
correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
government subsidized housing caters to a certain poverty level family or individual that it can't afford to do the rent.
Sure,
So it's
certain
basically-
socioeconomic class.
and there's benefits to the owner that if they're not ever occupied, they still get paid money from the federal government through some sort of grant, I guess. I don't know, but I've heard that there's been units that sit empty and the developer and the owner still gets a check from the government, whether they're occupied or not. Now, I don't know how true all this is, but we have a lot of Section 8 housing in Shelbyville and Bedford County.
We do have, we have a fair amount. I don't know the part you're saying about whether they get a check if they're not occupied. I do not know that, and I'd want to look into that before I'd say anything on that.
That's what I've heard from people that have looked at that.
But that's, again, that gets back to property owner rights. If the property is zoned correctly and they build whatever is allowed in the zoning regulation, you can't pick and choose who gets to live on that property, even if it's not what you'd prefer in the socioeconomic or the, where that's just something.
I know Tullahoma and Coffee County at one time had a moratorium on Section 8 housing. And I don't know how they pulled that off.
I don't know how they would have pulled that off. We can't even do a moratorium on, and Rutherford County's looking to do one on apartment complexes, and I'm not sure that they're going to get that passed. But I know currently we're not allowed any kind of moratorium other than that one self-imposed one we have on the east side, and that's because there's a sewer issue that they're not able to provide sewer service.
So basically, there's some laws that handcuff us from managing our overpopulation. We have to abide by.
Well, which is why, for coming again to planning this month, we've got to look at tightening up our zoning regulations. The only thing we can do legally is increase our zoning requirements as far as, and one of the ones I looked, I actually sent this to our planning director this week. Thompson Station has a new, they've got a new outlet mall that somebody's looking at building there. But anyways, they had just redone their comprehensive plan, and I looked at theirs. They require 45% green space on any residential development there right now. So, that's almost, 45%, that's almost half. So that's huge, which we're at 10% right now. So we've got some room there legally that we can increase that green space, and that helps keep the number of units down. That helps provide more green space for the people that are going to live there for the next 20 years. So they're not living where they feel like they got, their neighbors crowded in on top of them. They've actually got some space to breathe and, live their lives. So that's the kind of things we can do. Couple of the things that happened at the Thursday meeting real quick. I know we are way over on time, I'm sure. So actually we're not doing too bad.
We're okay.
We're normal.
We're okay.
But transfer station changes to the zoning, that was finally approved on the first reading. Both our planning director and our city attorney did a good job. They went in there. We did a ton. This is one that's been going on for a couple of months now. We slowed it down. We did a lot of research. A couple of us went to an actual transfer station. We took what was already the state requirements for a transfer station, which they're already going to be in place because the state has them. We looked at them, looked at things that we thought were not necessarily loopholes, but things that we didn't like that could still happen under the state regulation.
Right.
So we tightened them. One at least particular instance is under state transfer station laws. You always have to have the building cleaned at the end of the day, but under the state law, you could have trailers parked outside the building full of trash as long as they had a tarp over them, and you could just, as much space as you had, you could leave it with trailers of trash overnight.
Overnight.
And we didn't feel good about that because obviously you got a bunch of trailers of trash sitting out there. Even with the tarp over it, you're going to attract.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to attract rodents. You're going to attract vultures. Probably.
There could be a smell issue.
There could be a particular odor that would come out of that. So we made it to where they can have no more than one partially filled trailer. There were some other smaller things that we tweaked in there, but basically we just looked at the state law. We did some tightening, and it's been approved once. It'll come up one more time for a vote next month. I'm feeling good about where we're at now with it. And the bigger reason that we're allowing it as is to move through is the savings on getting our trash out of town, and it's going to save taxpayers for theoretically for the next 20 years. We've got a 10-year contract tied to this. It's got 2 5-year extensions, and this locks us in at a particular rate, which is higher than what we're paying, but lower than what it would be if we were having to truck our trash out of town ourselves.
Right.
So, we had 3 new firefighter positions funded at the meeting. That was, to me, a no-brainer. We needed the firefighters, so we voted yes. There's an event for the community clinic. The city is giving $5,000 to that at a hotel motel money. I had a little side discussion after the meeting with somebody, and I said, this is getting borderline. The community clinic does great work, so I'm glad we're giving them $5,000. But this one is borderline on the council has previously decided not to give donations to nonprofits because that can get really political. Because, whose nonprofit is worth giving money to and whose isn't? There's so many nonprofits. You could, who wants to be the one to say no to a nonprofit?
Sure.
So in this case, this one we kind of got in there under tourism because it is bringing in a few people from out of town. And again, the community clinic's doing great work. So we're not, we have no issue with them. And then another thing that had to get passed, this is one it's one that you kind of vote yes on and aren't really happy about, but you really don't have a choice. This is that the Riverview District parking lot expansion, which is over there in front of the Fly Art Center. We had already approved a budget amount for that. They dug into the ground.
Here we go.
And they found there had been a building at that site that they didn't know about.
Didn't know about the building.
Didn't know there'd been a building. So there was an entire foundation of a building underground. So they couldn't just, what had previously been there was just grass and a grassy
There are
area.
maps that show that type of stuff, Josh.
Well, maybe somebody didn't find it on the map. I don't know.
Probably not.
I'm just, there was a building. So
$32,000.
It was $32,000 because they've now got to dig out all that and put in fill rock because where it was previously just grass, grass it didn't matter, but now you're going to park cars there. If you park cars where you've got a bad ground, it's going to sink at some point.
Your paving's gone pretty quick.
Your paving is gone. And then last item, it wasn't last on the agenda, but we'll get to it last. There was and this was the one we thought might have a little more debate. There was a decision on the city refunding the Shelbyville-Bedford Partnership. And the vote by a margin of 5-1 was to defer this for one more month and to allow the partnership to come into the council if they so desire and give a presentation on what they're doing in the community and why they think we should give them another $100,000 of taxpayer money. They currently get $100,000 a year from the county. And the question is, does the city give them another $100,000 a year, which at that point obviously is $200,000 a year of taxpayer money.
Right.
So is what they're doing worth that much taxpayer money? Should it be privately funded more? Some of the stuff we'd heard way back when the partnership was more of a hot button issue, I think from Mr. Christie, who's on the city council, was the initial pitch when they were brought into town was that they needed money from government for a certain number of years, but then they were going to do such great work that corporations were going to step in and they were going to get funded by business, and then taxpayers wouldn't be on the hook for it and businesses would be paying for it. That's clearly not happened yet, and we've had a number of years, so they're currently still using some taxpayer. Now they are obviously have some business funding because they're not operating on $100,000 a year.
No, they're getting from the county $100,000.
Yeah, and they're getting something from private. And I'd be curious, and that would be one of the questions I'll ask. I want to see some actual numbers. What are they operating on now? What's their budget?
I guess the biggest issue is, how's it going to help the city of Shelbyville?
Correct.
To ask the city of Shelbyville for $100,000.
Yeah. What are we going to get for $100,000?
Now, if they're going to have an industrial recruiter, or they had one, I guess that was the name of his title.
I think so.
Mr. Hooper, Shane Hooper's title.
Yeah, that was. He was called CEO president, but his role was supposed to be recruiting industry
and business. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I guess the question becomes, if there's that, is it for the city and the county? Okay, which obviously, if the county has a business out in the county, it's benefited them. And if the city gets a business, is there somebody doing that? I guess that's a big question. Sure. And if that's the case, does the city need to have an industrial recruiter? Does the county, is this going to be in lieu of? If that's the case and you don't have that salary, it makes sense to pay somebody. And if that somebody's in a part of the partnership, that
Right.
makes sense. But if my memory serves me correctly, the question was asked if we're going to give the 100,000, and I think it was 2 years ago when this came up.
Yeah, it was the
I
last
think
time.
Commissioner Ewing or Council Member Ewing asked the question, well, can we see your book work to see where we're at financially? And they were denied that. Is that the way that played out? And we backed out as a city.
There was some back and forth on financials. That'll be another question I'll ask as well. And I think possibly Councilmember Ewing will ask as well. We'd want to see current financials, and I would assume they would want to share those since they're expecting taxpayer money. I don't know that, I guess, until we ask the question.
Okay,
So,
another question too
yeah.
that I have, and you might know this, and it
Yeah.
appears that the Chevrolet Bedford Chamber of Commerce is now under the umbrella of the Chevrolet Bedford Partnership.
Correct.
How did that take place? And which I think the Chevrolet Bedford Partners, the Chamber of Commerce should be privately funded by local businesses.
Right. Normally, a chamber, as far as I know,
right.
is funded by the
So
businesses.
how-
I mean, you're
how
paying
does-
membership fees and whatnot.
Will that be
so-
separated? And that's something to think about too.
right?
As I first and foremost, what is the goal?
Yeah.
What's the purpose? Is the main thing.
Yeah.
So
And is
a lot
it
of
measurable
questions.
too? Yeah. I
Right.
mean, you can make a lot of promises and stuff, but you want to have some kind
Well,
of a
yeah.
measurable goal. Where
You can also
say,
take a lot of credit for stuff you had nothing to do with, which I've seen that for the last 5 years.
right.
We
yeah.
got ribbon cuttings popping up. This business came to town and
We get a lot
hadn't
of
heard
ribbon
of the
cuttings.
partnership before. And there's a ribbon cutting with the partnership standing out there like they did it. Okay. And I'm getting on gray area here and,
Right.
and tiptoeing around. I'm not going to tiptoe around it. There's a lot of people that bring a business to town and somebody takes credit for it in
Right.
government or this organization or that organization. And when in fact had nothing to do with it.
Right. Yeah. Other than we know in the Chick-fil-A instance, they actually
Well, the
wrote
city
somebody
of
a check.
Shelbyville,
Yeah,
the city of Shelbyville
yeah.
did. The
Yeah,
partnership did.
No, they did not. The city, yes.
You know, and I don't think the partnership had anything to do with that. I don't know. Could have.
They made the ask, but they didn't.
Okay.
They didn't write the check.
No,
So,
the check
city
came
wrote
from
the
the city.
check. So yeah,
But there's a lot of crossover here when you get into private business and government interaction
right.
and commingling of taxpayer money. I understand a group of people, business people, wanting to help the area because it's going to help their business possibly.
Oh, sure.
And I could understand that, but how it integrates with the city and the county government, that's where the gray area is, and that's taxpayer money. So everybody has to be real careful.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll definitely be watching for that. I'll be curious. A, if they give a presentation, B, who gives the presentation, then obviously the actual content, what they actually have to show us. So, and with that was enough meetings for 1 week. And that's all we got to cover from the past week for now. But before we get into what's coming up this coming week, let's hear from our sponsor one more time.
Get the results you want with the personalized service you deserve at Dennis Young Insurance Agency.
As a local independent agency, we offer coverage from several different companies, including Erie. So whether it's auto, home, life, personal, or business, we can find the right coverage to meet your unique insurance needs. And with a rate lock advantage, your rates won't go up as long as you do not change drivers, autos, or addresses. Contact us at Dennis Young Insurance Agency, insuring Shelbyville and surrounding areas since 19...
All righty, we're going to wrap things up here on the wrap up show.
We're wrapping
Josh,
up
what
on
we
wrap
got?
up.
What we got happening this week?
Upcoming week, 2 big meetings. One, actually, both on the county side. Nothing on the city this week. Tuesday evening, we have the county committee meetings. This will be rules and legislative. It used to be called law enforcement. They've renamed it. I think it's called public safety now, and courthouse and property. In addition to that, there's a meeting before the meeting that I'm not invited to. Neither are you. None of us are invited to. They're having an attorney-client meeting at 4:30, which there was a little confusion yesterday. Initially, it looked like it was to discuss the wastewater plant, which made no sense at all.
No.
And it ended up being somebody got their wires crossed and confused several events that were happening on the same day.
Right.
It's actually an attorney-client meeting to discuss the ongoing lawsuit, which, as I found out from the county press release that was put out, is now scheduled to be heard in court the end of April. I believe it said 28th, 29th, and 30th, which was news to me. I'm on the other side of the lawsuit. I didn't even know what date it was.
Yeah.
So I got that from a county press release. But and after they have that meeting, which none of us are invited to, that's all just the lawyers and the county commission, then they'll have these committee meetings as a part of the final committee, which is the courthouse and property. either in their meeting or immediately following the adjournment of their meeting, they will hopefully have that study session where they're going to discuss the wastewater authority. So that could be a long evening. I'll be there for all of the parts of that evening that they let me into that don't involve lawyers, and we'll cover that next week. And then Thursday evening is the monthly school board meeting. I looked at that agenda. It appears that there's going to be a presentation. I don't know if it's going to be in person or by video, but by Pat Marsh and Shane Reeves on the current state of legislation connected with schools. And I would assume there'd probably be some talk of vouchers and stuff at that. So I'll definitely be going to that one to hear what they have to say about what's going on at the state level that's affecting our local school system. And we'll have all of that here next week. Plus, much like the BCUD thing that happened this week, something's liable to come out of left field. We don't know what it is.
We always got our eyes on left field.
There's
Josh.
always something that could happen, and we'll be here to cover it. So we'll be right back here, same time, same station, same location, and we'll talk about the news that matters here in Shelbyville and Bedford County next week.